And because it's the month of March, we're going to talk about, guess what? Women's History Month. Yeah, so Women's History Month is celebrated in the United States, Australia, Canada, and UK. But like in Canada, I think it's in the month of October. And it's not an international holiday, but I think it makes us question a lot of things about gender, about women's rights, equality, and all those things. And we just had the 8th of March, that is International Women's Day, and this is commemorated, like celebrated internationally. So, but it's interesting to me, the word Women's History Month, because if you think about it, it implies a lot of things in itself. First, why women's history needed to have this month designated for it, and it was in the late 70s, so pretty recently. And where were women throughout all this time? We're half of the world population. Where is our history?
I truly believe our history of us as women, not only cis, but everyone who identifies as women,
Yes.
we were silenced, right? That's why we didn't have a history. That's why we've been hearing only masculine history, only the worldview of men, right? Because everything, all history, all kinds of histories, they are interpretation of facts. And this interpretation is showing a point of view of who is in power. And until pretty recently, only men could have this power of like perpetuating a narrative and this history that we know. But it doesn't mean that this is what truly happened, because women, they have always been so important. I mean, we are here as human beings because somebody was our moms, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't even have been born. So our history is truly, truly important, but we didn't have the social power, to be heard. That's the fact. Yeah.
That's right. And I think it's important to say, like you were saying, history is like an exercise of power. Who writes history? And it's important to say that until nowadays has been pretty much cisgender men, white cisgender men specifically. So it's a very small part of the world population that has been telling stories about everyone else or excluding them, because narrative is not only about what is included, but what is excluded purposefully. And women's history is also something that is being shared mainly throughout like oral history. So it's not exactly in textbooks. It's not exactly the thing you're going to find in encyclopedias and the academic knowledge, because university itself is a very male-dominated institution from the beginning. They didn't accept women to go within, for like resulting in the history we know that doesn't include women's perspectives. And only recently, I would say, like with all academic researchers and all those things, but women's oral history is so important because it tells us so much about who we are and like the mother line and telling our roles in society. And the role of women has been also represented as medicine women and the ones who deal with rites of passage in the community, the birth, the death, and all the things in between. They are the caregivers, they are the supporters, and women have historically they've been working in society in various different ways, but sometimes it's a work that is made invisible, I would say.
This work is made invisible only because of our society and the structure of, capitalism, giving value only for those who are productive by the means of capital, right? And I think it's really important to talk about storytelling because it gives us a perspective of the other side, of the underdogs, of the people who have not been heard or who have not being given the chance to express themselves in a way that is considered legitimized or official. So those unofficial narratives are really, really important to put some light into histories of people who have not had the chance to be shown, or represented. And one aspect of culture that is really important is that culture is not static. It's always evolving and changing. So I think storytelling is a way that really permits and allows this transformation and this interpretation of things in a way that suits the person who is living the culture in that moment. And also to those who have been, the history that have been passed down, the way that people receive that history. It's also being shaped because no person will tell the history the same way when it's spoken, right? And adding little facts and taking some others is what makes this culture and this story be shaped in a way that is truly meaningful and true to the moment and to the people who are telling the stories. And this shows a lot about the history of women, and we see many people, sharing songs that their grandmas used to sing to them, or tales, or histories that are almost like fairy tales, but they always have something that is really deep and transformational and something that aggregates value and will show a kind of lesson to the person who is receiving that knowledge.
Yes. And like you were saying, I think it's important to say that every time that there is power, there is also counterpower.
Resistance.
And I think, yes, this kind of, so I think the role of women in telling those stories is also a submersive role and like changing power dynamics. And because they were expected to be the ones raising children and telling the stories, teaching them how to act in community, how to be part of that society, and giving like the morals and all those things, they play a very, very big role, foundational role in societies and communities in general. And even like there are some theories that talk about the role of grandmothers in the development of societies, how they're important for like the structuring of communities, because they were the ones who had to stay with the kids. So they were the ones who had to teach them how to behave and how to, interact among themselves. And I think it's fascinating what you're saying about storytelling and like tales, because everyone is familiar with fairy tales, I think. It can be from the very spooky ones, like the Grinch brothers. And Green Brothers was their name.
Yeah, I think so.
And like the original fairy tales, but like the original fairy tales, they were spooky and they were scary and they had a lesson, because usually they were told to young girls to warn them about the dangers of the world, and not just saying like a prince in a shining armor will come and save you, but more like be aware, you have your power, you have your strength, but the world is not always this nice place. You learn to defend yourself, you learn to. And we were discussing earlier, me and my sister, about Disney fairy tales and how like women as being portrayed in those fairy tales, like the princesses.
I mean, the old ones, okay.
The old ones, yes. I cannot save most of them. Yes, because they're so problematic.
I think the first one we can talk a little bit about is the Beauty and the Beast. I really don't like that one. I mean, the Beauty is such a...
Go ahead.
The Beauty is such a smart girl, and she has all the potential, and she's such a lovely person with her dad, who's also a nice guy, and she's powerful and strong. As you were saying, like keeping her boundaries with the Gaston, I think was his name, right?
Yeah, Belle knows how to put her boundaries in place. She doesn't allow Gaston to mess around with her. and she's very smart. She knows her place in the village and she questions everything. But then she gets napped by the beast and she decides to stay in the castle. I mean,
First of all, it's a kidnap. And she's being held hostage, by a person who is not even a person, is like a monster or a beast. It's not pretty at all. Imagine this in real life, a guy who looks like a beast imprisoning you in a castle far away from everyone. That's not pretty. And it's kind of very twisted, like how a person would fall in love with a beast only by knowing he was good at heart. But for me, it sounds a lot like manipulation.
Yeah. It's very unhealthy. Don't do that. Don't fall in love or doing this to you. Yeah. And just with the hopes of transforming him. So like this very sacrificial role of women is in the story as well. Like how women have to believe in love and how they have to believe in the transformational power of love, but in a very problematic way. Because of course love is beautiful and it is transformational, but not like this. And yeah, unlike other fairy tales, I mean, Little Mermaid, she sells her voice. What? You don't sell your voice, girl. Never.
She sells her voice and she gives up on her own true nature.
Yeah.
As a mermaid, to be voiceless, speechless, like not being able to speak for herself in a human body just because she wanted to be with the prince. No.
And then, yeah, and there's many others like the Sleeping Beauty. I mean, she was sleeping, don't kiss her, please. Very basic stuff. But at least we have a few new stories that are pretty good, in my opinion. Like Mulan. I still love Mulan. And
Moana.
Moana. I love Moana. I love her grandma. You're so magical and beautiful. And I want to watch Raya now. She's also the dragon and she's saving things. And yeah, I think it's more empowering to see women in those positions. Tiana is also really nice.
I didn't watch.
The Princess and the Frog. She has her own business and she's like a go-getter. And yes, I think it's good that the stories around women are also changing because, like we said in a few episodes, I think it is so important to see representations of who we are on screen and know that our stories are also like allowed to exist and that you can have a different story than, the one you're living that might be of oppression or suppression or silence.
This also shows that women can have powerful roles. They can be their own saviors, They don't need someone else to come and take care of everything for them. So it's really beautiful to see this empowerment.